it's the co-parent conflict that damages the children much more than simply divorcing does. Divorcing can be
Right.
hard, but
Yeah.
it's the co-parent conflict. So the PC's job is to eliminate or reduce that conflict so that the children will be okay. And for
Right.
us, that means pulling the parents apart more than it means trying to get them to cooperate.
Yeah. Teaching them how to set appropriate co-parent boundaries, I think, is
Correct.
a huge part of PC. Parenting coordination, the goal is ultimately to keep you from having to go to court, but also to help you execute the parenting plan peacefully. And if you can't and won't and don't, the parenting coordinator has some power then to testify or make a report to a judge in a later case that says, well, here's the problem parent. Here's who I thought was the impossible, and here was the non-impossible. They might not use
Yes.
that terminology, but
No.
that's in essence what they're doing. So let's talk about the comparison between that and co-parent counseling. Hey, this is Diane Dirks.
And I'm Rick Voiles.
We've been working with co-parents in conflict for more than 2 decades. We've taught classes, written books, counseled parents, empathized, and agonized a few times to help people make sense of their complicated families.
We were talking one day, and it occurred to us that helping the most difficult cases comes down to one simple concept. Is one parent willing to let go of the tug-of-war rope, or is it worth it to hold on and fight?
So we invite you to take this journey with us each episode as we tackle the questions, should you hold on or let it go? Welcome to Co-Parent Dilemmas, where we give you practical solutions to those impossible co-parents. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Diane.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
My grandkids here in Atlanta are getting to that age where you can take them individually,
Yes.
have that special moment with just them. And I went to, I don't know, everybody has something like this, but Stars and Stripes. It's kind of like a Dave and Buster's,
Oh, yeah.
right? And took the
Like
5-year-old,
neon bowling at night and
right?
stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And
I
of
love
course,
it.
bought the card with all the credits, and of course he's going through it like it's unlimited.
Right, of course.
So in about 15 minutes, we were done.
Now what do you want to do?
Exactly. Yeah. But that was fun.
Yeah. My granddaughter is about to turn 13, which just floors me.
Wow.
And I'm going to have a teenage granddaughter, but we're going to do a similar thing. Not Stars and Strikes, but something.
Yep.
Grammy and Granddaughter Day. Those are fun.
Pedicure, manicure.
I don't know, something.
Yes. Spa day.
So before we do what we're going to do today, I wanted to answer a piece of fan mail that we got. And FYI, for those of you who use the fan mail, that's the little thing you click on in our episode notes that says, send us a quick text. We can't answer those directly unless you give us an email address. So I do want to honor when people put them up there that we can read them and respond to them on air. And this one was really short and simple. Can you do an episode about estate planning with blended families? And neither you or I are estate planners.
No.
Or financial experts. However, you and I have both done something like this in our own blended families, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say something about that since I thought it was a really interesting question. And for those of you who maybe don't have blended families yet, are wondering why is that important? And I think it's an honorable way to protect your family after you're gone from conflict, especially if there's not a lot of love between step parents and step children.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean they have to be at odds with one another, but if they're distant, or in my case, my current husband, I married him once my kids were much older, so he didn't raise them, right?
Right.
And the fear, I think, is if I die and everything goes to my current husband, then my adult children don't get anything of me, and there's no guarantee that he will leave them anything.
Right.
So in my case, my husband and my kids are very close. But then the real fear is, what if he then, when he's 70 or 80, decides to marry 30-year-old Bambi?
Yes. Yes.
And then she gets everything from both of us.
Right.
And then my kids are going, well, not that they're money hungry, but how did mom's stuff get absorbed into his stuff and end up with the stripper?
Right. Yes.
Not saying my
Uh-huh.
husband's listening. I'm not saying you would ever do such a thing, but
Uh-huh.
when you're 80 and the 30 something looks really good and she's a gold digger, you never know.
It happens, I guess. Yep.
So you have experience with it too, you and Janet, correct?
Well, not the stripper part, but yes, we have
Oh,
experience.
she doesn't fear that you'll end up with a stripper?
No, not at all. Yes, we did that in the form of a trust, and we went double duty because we needed to develop a special needs trust because of our special needs
Right.
daughter. So we got to handle all of that in the one trust.
Right. So there are estate planning attorneys. I would highly recommend. It can be expensive, but I think way worth it for peace of mind at some point. So I hope that answers your question. It was someone from Texas, didn't give me a name or email, but if you have further questions about that or want me to point you in another direction, email us.
Yeah, look for an attorney that does trusts. Would
Right.
a good person to talk to first. Yep.
Yeah.
Not just probate.
Right. Yeah. They have to have some experience with it, especially if they have experience working with blended families. That would be awesome. Ours did, and she was really great.
And by the way, after going through that process with a very experienced trust attorney who has a process, that was just so much easier than I thought it was going to be. And so at the end, it was, why didn't we do this sooner? It was like, wow.
Right. And there's some peace of mind that if something were to happen, all you have to do is make a call to that attorney, and they have all the pieces of the puzzle that you forgot about because it's been years since you did it. They've got it right there in their files and know what to do for you. And it's great.
Yeah. For example, we moved since we wrote the trust, and it was easy to say, hey, we moved. What do I have to do? And then bam, 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 send me this, send me that. I already had it in my file because it was all part of the closing.
Right.
And boom, it was done. It just so
awesome.
much easier. Yep.
That's a good point. I don't think we notified our attorney that we moved. Thanks, Rick.
Okay. You're welcome.
So today we're going to do something similar to what we did a few weeks ago when we did a special episode on mediation, because we felt the need to do some education to help people know what to expect if you have an upcoming mediation. And it occurred to us that we should do the same thing for parenting coordination.
Yes.
So we're going to explore that, I think, because we get a lot of mixed reviews about parenting coordination. Would you say that, Rick?
There is a lot of confusion, just like with mediation. There's a lot of confusion about what a PC is and is not, and what to expect in that process. Yep.
Sometimes when you mention the word PC or the phrase PC or parenting coordination, people cringe because they're like, oh, I went through that. It felt like marital therapy, or, oh, I went through that and it was, terrible and it didn't really help. And then you'll hear other people say, yeah, our PC was great. And so like any other profession, there are people that are really good at it. And then there are people that don't do it so well, and people that are very trained and people that aren't so trained. I think I mentioned in one of our episodes how my real estate attorney across the street from me did my divorce when I went through a divorce because it was free and he was a friend.
Yeah, right.
And it turned out to be not the best choice because he wasn't trained in family law.
Yep.
Even though he had a title of attorney, back then I thought, well, he's an attorney, he knows what to do. And then,
Mm.
now that I'm in the know many, many years
Right.
later, I realized he had no clue what he was doing. He was
Right.
just trying to be nice. So when you're going through something kind of like I need heart surgery, I don't want a doctor that's nice
No.
necessarily. I mean, that's icing on the cake. I want a doctor who knows what he or she is doing.
Yep.
Correct? Okay. So same here. Unfortunately, though, Rick, oftentimes people don't have a choice of
Right.
which
Yeah.
parenting coordinator they get. So oftentimes it's set by the judge or attorneys throw out a name and they agree. And then suddenly the client is going, well, I don't even know this person. They don't have a whole lot of say, I guess, control over which professional they choose, which is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And so this episode is not only for parents, I want it to also be for judges and attorneys and therapists and professionals to not just throw a name into the mix because you met them at an event.
Right.
Because that happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Or because my sister's cousin's brother's wife knows this person. Do your homework. Make sure that the people that you are hooking your clients up with know what they're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, what is parenting coordination? How does it compare to something like co-parent counseling, which is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot as well? What are the qualifications? And then what is the process? So that's kind of where we're going with this episode.
Very good.
Okay. So let's start with what is parenting coordination? It's a fairly, I would say, comparatively new alternative dispute resolution process within the last 30 years or so. Would you say? I don't know. I don't know that there's an exact creation date of
No.
parenting coordination. It's sort of evolved out of mediation.
Mm-hmm.
We use mediation techniques in parenting coordination, but it goes beyond mediation in that you do a lot more education. You're after the fact, people get a parenting plan, and your job is to help the parents execute that parenting plan in the most peaceful way possible. And ultimately keep them out of court so that when something goes awry, they don't just say, well, I'm going to call my attorney and I'll see you in court. Hopefully they say, let's call the parenting coordinator, see if we can work through this. In fact, many people have in their court orders that they can't litigate until they mediate or sometimes visit their parenting coordinator.
Yes.
As a next step before you go to court, which I think is smart, So parenting coordination, the goal is ultimately to keep you from having to go to court, but also to help you execute the parenting plan peacefully. And if you can't and won't and don't, the parenting coordinator has some power then to testify or make a report to a judge in a later case that says, well, here's the problem parent. Here's who I thought was the impossible, and here was the non-impossible. They might not use that terminology, but that's in essence what they're doing. So let's talk about the comparison between that and co-parent counseling. I don't know where the phrase co-parent counseling came from, but it's certainly not official. Parenting coordination is an official term. There is official training for it. There may be somewhere out there someone doing co-parent counseling training. I don't know about it, but in the circles where I run, I don't hear about it. No. You would think that I would. So I think it evolved out of hybrid couples counseling / family counseling. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
So what started to happen when divorce became more prominent, therapists began to see there's issues with co-parents, right? And just come to a family counselor and we'll help you by giving you some co-parent counseling. There are some issues and differences between them that I think our listeners need to know about, though. I know, at least here in Georgia, there's some case law about anything that you name counseling or therapy is deemed confidential.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true in other states, but I know that here we pay attention to that. So if you sign a contract of mine that says I'm doing co-parent counseling, but in the same contract, I say I might go to court, that could get me in trouble later.
Yeah.
And I might testify and tell the judge what you've done in co-parent counseling, because now we have the counseling word in opposition to testimony.
Yes.
Right. So if you get that kind of contract, I would question it. Wait a minute. Is this co-parent counseling? Because your contract says you might go to court. Now, most contracts I've read, and I've read several, where someone has done co-parent counseling and then my client will show me the contract, it says I will not go to court.
Okay.
Most of them. Okay. What that means, Rick, for the impossible co-parent, they like that. Because if you're not going to go to court and tattle on me,
Oh my gosh.
then I can do anything I want in co-parent counseling. I can manipulate it. I can control it. I can leave it. And you can't tell anybody.
Right.
So there's no teeth in co-parent counseling. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't work. It can work for a certain percentage of the population. It can work, I think, for low to moderate conflict co-parents.
Sure.
Where, you get a divorce and maybe the divorce process was really hard and you're grieving and you just need someone to help you transition from being in a romantic relationship to being in a more business-like relationship with a co-parent.
Yep.
Goals have changed in your relationship and you just need some help clarifying what those goals are now. And so it can work very well that way when neither party is thinking about court. They're just genuinely wanting help. And in that regard, I think it's a great process. We actually stopped doing it in our organization because anything that comes through on a court order, if the court has to order you to do it, chances are you are not low to moderate conflict.
Indeed.
Right.
We rarely worked with anybody that was low to moderate.
So by definition, if it's court ordered, chances are you don't need that. You need parenting coordination because by contrast, parenting coordination is not confidential.
True.
Everybody understands by definition, it's not a therapeutic process. The PC can go to court and testify if there's a future case. PC can make a report and tell the judge anything and everything that happened in parenting coordination, which is very unlike mediation, right? We talked about mediation being completely confidential and the reasons why.
Yep.
This is not confidential for a very good reason, so that the difficult co-parent doesn't get to just act out without being tattled on later.
Right. Yep.
So that's kind of how it's different from co-parent counseling. Let's talk about the qualifications of a PC, because I think this is huge. Like I said before, you don't want a real estate attorney doing your divorce. You don't want, a gastro doctor doing your heart surgery. I mean, you want someone who is trained, but the problem is, how do you know how well trained they are? And there's a few questions you can ask a potential PC, and attorneys, please take this to heart before you refer your client to one. Call them up and ask them these questions. How long have they been doing parenting coordination? How many cases have they done? Don't ask them how often they've been successful. They should say every time. If it's some level, every time I have succeeded in getting done what I needed to do based on what I was given.
Right.
And make sure that ask them about their training. How did you get trained? They should know the name of the person they trained with, what year it was, what they learned, and if they get annoyed at your questions, then they're not the one for you, because everybody has a right to ask those questions. We always talk about AFCC, the Association of Family and Conciliatory Courts. It's afccnet.org. That's an organization both Rick and I belong to and have for many years. And they are the ones who created the standards and guidelines for parenting coordinators. If you do not have any of those in your state, some states have a statute for parenting coordination, have their own guidelines. Georgia does not. So we always were under the guidelines of the AFCC. We chose to be. Because they're the organization that put a bunch of professionals together, I don't know, 20 years ago and decided this is how we want this profession to be accountable. So there are ethical guidelines, there are process guidelines, that kind of thing, with a lot of latitude, of course, so that people can kind of do it the way they need to do it in their specific jurisdictions. So ask if they're a member of the AFCC. If they say, I've never heard of it, I would be suspect on their training.
Mm-hmm.
Would you, Rick? I mean,
I would.
If you're a parenting coordinator, you've not heard of the AFCC. Now, it's possible because the American Psychological Association also has parenting coordination guidelines. So they may say, well, I'm not a member of that, but I'm a psychologist and I belong to the APA and we have our own guidelines. That's an acceptable answer because that means they've been trained through the APA somehow. So they should know one of those two things. They're either a member of AFCC or they follow the guidelines of the APA. So ask them, which guidelines do you follow? Do you follow the state statute guidelines? Do you follow the AFCC guidelines? Do you follow the APA guidelines? And I'll put all of those links in our show notes. And if they pause and go, hang up. They don't know what they're doing. Okay. Yep. So attorneys, take heed because your clients are at your mercy. If you're the ones choosing the parenting coordinator.
Yes.
If the wrong people are doing it all the time and not really doing it according to how parenting coordination ought to be done, then in that jurisdiction, what the judges and attorneys think is parenting coordination is the way that those two people that always get their names thrown out there are doing it. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it well.
Yeah, I can't. A majority of the time when I've set up my first session with new clients, I will hear, oh, you're our third PC or our fourth PC. And I totally do not think you're going to be able to do anything with her or him. And what I have to keep reiterating is, yeah, but this is your first time with me.
Yeah. Yep. So enough of that. Let's move on to the process because I think this is where the real meat of what we want to talk about is. First of all, people think that the process should be non-biased or unbiased. And that's almost impossible. Because if I'm working with co-parents and one is an impossible parent and the other one's a non-impossible,
right,
I am going to become a little bit biased against the impossible parent. It's not that I have bias, it's what I do with that bias that matters.
Right.
Meaning I now recognize that this parent is workable and reasonable and rational, but this parent across from them has a lot of problems and they have a need to keep the conflict going. And maybe they grew up in a high conflict family and they just enjoy conflict, or this feels normal to them, or they really need power in this relationship, or they're scared to death. And so whatever it is, they're going to need a different kind of attention.
Yes. I like the way that, yes, that's exactly the way.
So I don't have to claim or name it and go, well, I don't have to say to the non-impossible, that's an impossible parent. And you know what? I agree completely with you and how you're doing things. That's not helpful.
No.
But you can say to that non-impossible, hey, listen, I think I know what's going on here and I think I know what to do, because they need confidence. They need to know that you know what to do.
Yep.
And then you do your best to see if you can't maybe turn the impossible parent in a different direction. And Rick, you and I have both done this. Occasionally you can. It's amazing when you can. Yes. 9 times out of 10, you realize, as hard as I try, but I'm still going to give them respect. I'm still not going to make them feel like I'm turning on them.
Right.
Because that wouldn't be helpful whatsoever. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, now I really know what I'm dealing with. And, sometimes it takes time. Because people might be on their really best behavior in the beginning. And then all of a sudden you start to see things fall apart. And then their real true colors come out. And then you go, aha, there it is. It could take 90 days of working with them before you really kind of like get a feel for which parent, or is it both? Is it one that's causing these issues?
And there's a trust factor that you've got to
Right.
develop and confidence. I've started and I've learned over the years. I'll hit that neutrality thing. Oh, you're supposed to be neutral is the assumption. And I tell them in my first session, oh, I am biased. I will be biased throughout this process. I am biased toward your kids.
Right.
Which means I will always put their comfort, their interest over yours.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't need to know your kids to do that.
correct.
Because
Yes.
kids are kids.
Exactly.
And they're minors and they deserve protection. Right. Right. So that's number one. I just wanted to get that out of the way. A big part of the process in the beginning is education. We spend a couple of sessions, probably the first couple of sessions, just educating people. And maybe they've gone through a court ordered class or whatever, and you think they need individualized. Okay, here is why things are difficult for the two of you. Tell them what you know about conflict. Tell them what you know about co-parent conflict. Tell them what you know about cooperative co-parenting versus parallel co-parenting. I think it's extremely important in the very first session after you've gone through all of the guidelines and things. I think that's important. Educating them about the process of PC right off the bat is very important because they may not read your contract.
Right.
So talk about it. Talk about what's going to happen next and why. But then really going into, I'm going to move you into a parallel parenting process, and it might feel a little uncomfortable. And here's how we're going to do it. And here are the boundaries we're going to set. And if you do really well with that, then, and you think you can be cooperative, we'll certainly put our toe in the water of that. But most of the time you're here because that was really hard for you. And it's okay if you never get there, because parallel parenting is perfectly successful and normal if you do it well. And
Yep.
kids can do really well with parallel parenting. Parallel parenting sometimes has a bad taste in people's mouth. Oh, that means that we can't get along. Well, maybe you can't.
Right.
It's okay. You're divorced. That's why you got a divorce. You couldn't get along.
Yep.
And divorce is not something we take lightly. Somebody decided on divorce because there was just no other way.
Yep.
So you don't have to feel guilty about pursuing a parallel co-parenting style. So that should happen in the first couple of sessions. Hey listeners, co-parenting during the holidays with someone who abuses alcohol can be emotionally draining and far more taxing than just the seasonal expenses. Amidst the present wrapping and the hot cocoa pouring, you might find yourself constantly worrying about your kids' safety when they're with their other parent. As a co-parenting expert, I've worked with many parents facing the same dilemma, and one tool I often recommend is SoberLink. SoberLink lets you know immediately when your co-parent is drinking. It's a high-tech breathalyzer designed to prove sobriety during parenting time. Your co-parent tests at scheduled times throughout the day. Built-in facial recognition makes sure it's them. Tamper sensors flag any cheating attempts, and the results are sent directly to your phone or email so you can be confident your kids are with a sober parent. The holidays are stressful enough, so let SoberLink alleviate some of that anxiety. Visit www.soberlink.com/dilemmas to learn more and get $50 off your device. I think another thing that I think is important that a lot of PCs don't do right away is put them right away into some sort of structured communications protocol.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right away. They've just come off maybe a 2-year divorce process and have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they need to know that somebody's going to control the communication.
Yes.
I'm tired. Don't make me talk to him or her. I just don't want to. I'm still mad at them for parading 10 witnesses in the courtroom that had terrible things to say about me, and I'm not over that. So we talk about the battery, your battery gets charged up by the divorce process, go put it in a closet somewhere and let the battery lose its charge.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to stop interacting. But, the court order is going to require you to interact at some level for the sake of the children. So a structured communication protocol is the way to keep people communicating, but with extreme boundaries. And, I would say do that for the first 90 days at least, without a whole lot of communication. That helps that battery to kind of lose its juice and you can kind of get back to your normal way of thinking. And it also allows the PC to see, can you follow a protocol?
Right.
Are you capable of following a protocol? Because oftentimes you set up that box, the person that keeps jumping out of the box, it's pretty clear they're the impossible co-parent, right?
Yes.
So it helps us to know where the problem is with the co-parent conflict. So if your PC does not put you in some sort of structured communication protocol, ask about it. Are you going to do that? And, we teach our email protocol, but that's not to say it's the only and the best. I've seen other PCs do different types and they're good too. So whatever it is, the PC needs to say, okay, from now on, this is how you're going to communicate until I tell you otherwise.
Yep.
No texting, no, here's the protocol. And so look for that. That's a huge boundary, I think, that's important in PC. I think that after each session, the PC ought to send an email recap of what happened, kind of like meeting minutes. Have you ever been involved in groups or organizations where you have to have meeting minutes? The meeting minutes don't record what everybody said during the meeting. What do the meeting minutes record, Rick?
Oh, just the topics maybe that you talked about and the decisions that were made going forward and who's going to take charge on certain actions.
Old business, new business.
Yep.
Here's what was decided. Here's what was tabled. Here's what we're probably going to talk about next time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a bulleted point. How does that go?
Minutes that are organized by bullet
point. There you go. Short and sweet. And, so that there becomes a running record of what is happening in PC. And why is that important, Rick?
Oh, well, we want to be able to be clear what progress we've made, and it becomes a record going forward in case somebody questions what was decided. I've got one parent that heard one thing. I got the other parent who heard the other thing. And so let's be clear. Here's what I heard as the PC.
Now, if you don't record it, you run the risk that the impossible co-parent comes in the next time and changes history and gaslights.
Yep.
And says, that's not what I said. And you got that wrong. And then the PC's scratching his or her head going, oh, maybe I did get that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important that quickly, within the next day or within 24 hours, you send them a recap of what was decided so that it's clear. Now, that doesn't mean somebody won't take issue and say, that's not what I said. I'm like, okay, well, we'll revisit that in our next session. Another rule I think that PCs need to make is you don't communicate with me without copying the other co-parent. Why is that important, Rick?
Oh, well, one, for me, it kind of fuels that you're not colluding behind the scenes against me sort of thing. But then it also tapers down what you're going to be telling me about the other one. You're not going to be making up so many stories if you're making it clear to the other person. They're going to say, that's not true.
Yeah, there's a couple aspects to that. Let's talk about money. A PC, unlike your therapist, is going to charge you for everything they do. They should charge you for the in-session time, just like your attorney does. They should charge you for emails that you send them. They should charge you for the recap email that they send to you. And that's important because that will help you monitor how much you communicate with the PC, right?
Right.
So it makes you a little bit more accountable. I'm going to not write 20 pages to my PC. I might write 2 paragraphs because it will cost me more money for them to read 20 pages, right? So there's that aspect of it. But I think more importantly, people will monitor how they say something when they're copying the other parent, which is exactly what we want them to learn to do.
Yeah.
If they can email you about the other parent without copying the other parent, then they're going to go off the rails and do what they normally do. And that just perpetuates that habit of just saying whatever the heck I feel like saying.
Right.
But when I know the other parent is watching, number one, they may decide to not send it at all.
Mm-hmm.
They do send it. I'm going to say it in a way that is more palatable. I might be more respectful. And that is teaching them exactly what we want them to learn in their one-on-one communication with each other.
Which is exactly the point we were making in the mediation process of why joint conversations and joint sessions are important.
Right. Another thing that I think is important that you do fairly quickly is review the parenting plan. And that probably ought to happen in like session 3. You ought to let them know in session 2, you know what? Before an issue comes up with your parenting plan, let's go through that entire parenting plan and let's make sure that everybody agrees on what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Because how often do we see a tight, good parenting plan that's easy for everybody to understand?
It rarely.
Maybe never.
Yeah.
And then, that's because people that are human are writing it. And sometimes it's done piecemeal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not all done in one document. And so, one sitting. And so it's kind of like, building a house in stages. Something might get missed.
Yep.
Right. So most people are agreeable to that. I remember I had one client who was like, I'm not doing that. Why not? Because I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and this is what you got in the room. I'm like, yeah, I know. But even though it's probably not perfect, we need to flesh out the imperfections and make sure that he just didn't want to do it because he knew there were holes in it that he was going to use.
He was going to use. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Please don't take away my freedom
right.
to capitalize on the imperfections of the parenting plan. And so that didn't go well. But most of the time people, and I tell them, this is your homework. I want you to go through the entire plan and highlight any areas that you think are vague or that could cause problems. Now, we're not going to redo your parenting plan.
No.
Not what this is about. We just need to make agreements about what it says. And I will do the same thing because I'm experienced and I'm looking at language that might look, parents will be reasonable, and I'm going to make them define what does reasonable mean. And I've found that to be very, very beneficial down the road because there might be a paragraph about passports. And if it's not clear, we need to clarify that so that 6 months from now, when somebody wants to use a passport, we're not jumping into that conflict then.
Correct.
It's less emotional when you're doing it before the conflict arises. You can be more rational about negotiating it, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Another thing about these parenting plans is we always tell people, or in our organization, we told people no changes for the first 90 days.
Yep.
Why is that, Rick?
Well, some often people walk into their co-parenting experience thinking that flexibility is a sign of healthy cooperative dynamics. And so one person tries to be flexible and then the other one walks all over them, takes advantage of them, and it all causes all kinds of conflict. Let's see if we can just follow the thing that it says, and let's postpone flexibility until we can minimize conflict.
Yeah. So it's kind of, you're working on a reward system. If you do this well, then I'm going to reward you with the option of possibly being flexible. And I've had situations, and I know you have too, where they get to that 90 days and like, okay, let's try some flexibility, and you try it and it flops.
Oh, yes.
And then you go, you know what? You're not ready for that.
No.
And you may never be ready for that. And that's okay. A lot of times they want to change the plan because they didn't like what they got.
Exactly.
And they're trying to renegotiate it.
Yep.
And it just doesn't work. Which brings us to the next point, at least in our state, because we don't have a statute, and some states do and give PCs a lot more power. But in our state, since we don't have a statute, we can negotiate within the spirit of the plan, but we can't change the fundamentals of the plan.
True.
So talk about what that means, Rick.
Well, oftentimes there'll be a contradiction in between maybe a couple of different things, and they'll make a fight out of it. But given that one section's like right of first refusal or something like that, I can figure out, it's not very hard to figure out what the judge or the court intended optimistically, right, wording it this way. And you're going, that's not the way this works. Or, the the judge and the court has particular principles that they're trying to follow here. And so based upon that spirit, then we can clarify this way.
Yeah. I think a simple way to put that is, let's say one parent gets a Wednesday night dinner and he or she comes to a PC session and says, I can't do Wednesdays anymore because my work schedule has changed. Well, you don't just say, well, I guess you give up Wednesdays then.
Right. Or you got to quit your job.
Because the spirit of the plan and the time that they received was that they should have a midweek parenting time with their children.
Right.
So we need to negotiate another night.
Yeah, that's the principle, that you get a night.
Right.
Yes, right.
Or it says the children have Mother's Day with mom every year, but it doesn't give a time. And there's nowhere in the plan where it says here's special holiday times. You're going to have to negotiate a time. That would be within the spirit of the plan. The plan gives you something, but doesn't give enough detail. Yep. So we can do that, but we can't renegotiate parenting time or fundamental things like who gets final say on what major issues. All those things are fundamentals that we have to hold dear because it's the Bible, right?
Right.
We can't change the Bible. So we have to say, okay, what was the spirit of this and can we negotiate around it? If we can't get them to negotiate, and it's important, like changing a day or like coming up with a time for Mother's or Father's Day, then the PC would make a recommendation based on the spirit of the plan.
Right.
And most of our contracts say if we make a recommendation, you are to follow it. If they're negotiating something that's not even in the plan, and they say, you know what, I would really like to negotiate that we decide who's going to pay for school lunches. And nothing was said about that in the plan.
Right.
It was just absent. And you spend 2 sessions negotiating and they come to an impasse, I think the PC might say, we're done with that issue. It's not in the plan. You guys didn't mediate it. It's not in the plan. You can't seem to come to an agreement now. So it's a non-issue. Do what you're doing. Whatever that was, keep doing it.
Yep.
And I think in that regard, you don't get into these protracted conflicts that last for weeks.
Exactly.
And keep the conflict going.
No.
Somebody is the referee. Somebody is saying, I'm going to help you negotiate, or I'm going to make a recommendation, or we're going to just stop it and move on.
Yep.
Not in the plan. Obviously, the judge didn't think it was important, so carry on. And I think that gives not only the PC a sense of confidence, but also the parties.
Oh, yeah.
Like, okay, we're not going to beat this horse to death over time.
And protects the kids in the long run from let's end this conflict.
And there are times, I mean, every conflict's a little bit different. There are times where as a PC, you may feel like, okay, this conflict is affecting the children. I need to make some sort of recommendation so they don't keep getting stuck in the middle of it.
Yep.
Then you might make a recommendation. But we're very, very careful to not make fundamental changes to the parenting plan, but only negotiate within the spirit of the plan. And that really is kind of subjective. This is where you want an experienced parenting coordinator who's done this before. They're like, yeah, okay, I've had this situation 10 times before. I think I know what to do with it. That's very, very valuable. One of the things I think it's important to do, and I'm not saying a PC should do this, but I'll throw it out there is I think a good practice is to sit with the parents and develop a mission statement for their kids, so that every conflict you can come back and say, well, this is what you said your mission statement was for these kids. And we're going to compare what you're asking to the mission statement. For instance, they may say in their mission statement, and they don't have to agree completely. Each parent has their own mission for their kids, but one or both parents, probably both parents, will say education is extremely important to me. And it's important that my kids, they can say anything they want. They could say it's important that my kids go to an Ivy League school. And I might not think that's important, or you might not think it's important, but to them, it's important. And these are their kids. And if that's what they want them to do, they have every right to put them in the best schools and make sure they focus on education. But then you come upon a conflict where one parent is saying, well, I know he's going to miss school for 3 weeks, but I really want to take him on that vacation. You can say,
Yep.
Well, let's go back to your mission statement. I think you said education was important. So, how does this fit with what you said was important to your kids? And then that might help move the negotiation along. So, anytime you do a mission statement, what also comes with that, Rick? Underneath of the mission statement?
Objectives for how to accomplish that mission statement.
Yeah. So I find that in the beginning, if you write that, help them write a mission statement and what are the things you're going to do to help achieve that. And a lot of times on their mission statement are things that are very emotional and abstract. I want to make sure my kids always feel heard. That's a great thing to put on the mission statement.
Absolutely.
So what's the objective underneath that? What are you going to commit to doing to make sure that that part of the mission statement is upheld?
And what's beautiful about that is those objectives are self-empowering. I can do that. It doesn't have anything to do with what the other parent does. I can accomplish my objectives.
Right. We talked about the goal of PC being to help keep you out of court and that kind of thing. But I think an intrinsic goal of PC is to transform people into feeling like they're in control of their own emotions, that they can have peace. Just because they have a co-parent who's difficult doesn't mean the next 10 years of my life are going to be miserable. That they can begin to see things differently. They can begin to compartmentalize. And yes, I am going to have to communicate with my co-parent occasionally, but it doesn't have to be a nightmare.
Right.
And when I do that, I will do it respectfully and effectively, and then we can move on. And I can have a normal life. And I think the PC process really can help parents get there if it's done well and done right. One thing PC is not is a babysitting service.
Thank goodness. Who would want to babysit
and I have
these people?
had clients tell me that they have a PC involved, and well, I called the PC at 3 a.m. because this happened. I'm like, what?
Lord,
or wasn't my weekend or wasn't her weekend, and I went to get the kids and she wouldn't let me have them, so I called the PC. And I'm thinking, no. There was actually a thing in my contract that says if it's after hours or weekends or whatever and you're having a conflict, your first priority is to take care of your kids and make sure they don't get stuck in the middle or witness it. And then we'll discuss the conflict in our next session. In other words, if you're at the house fighting over whose weekend it is, one of you, I'm expecting to be an adult and to walk away, even if you think it's your weekend.
Yes.
And then we'll discuss it at the next session about fairness and about what the parenting plan says and what can be done about it and whether or not you should have makeup time. All of that can be done outside of the kids' eyes and ears. So I think it's very important that PCs tell clients, no, I'm not going to babysit you for the next 5 years. There is a beginning and end to PC. And it should start out aggressive, meaning maybe you're doing weekly sessions and then you move into biweekly sessions. And then you maybe move after 6 months into monthly sessions. And eventually you should just be put on an as needed basis. And that should be no later than 18 months. If you can't get them to the right place in 18 months, either you're doing something wrong or they view you as the babysitter who's just going to solve every conflict that comes up for them.
Yes. Or someone's going back to court.
Right. Yeah. I had one PC tell me, oh yeah, I do that. And I charge them triple time if they call me. I'm like, no. Because you're not holding them accountable. You're and people with a lot of money, they'll pay you triple time to be able to call you at 3 a.m. because they think they own you. So,
right.
The only way to help them learn how to do it well is sometimes for you to not be available. And then they have to make a decision to do right by the kids, hopefully. If they don't, you can reprimand them when you see them and go, why? Why didn't either one of you just walk away so you could deal with this later? You're not going to die from it. Okay, you're going to miss out on a weekend you thought you would have, but we can remedy that later.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't have to be resolved in that moment, but anger starts to flare. And then the police get called and the poor children are watching somebody in handcuffs. I mean, that is the trauma that you don't want your kids to experience. So,
it's like raising children. You don't want them to live with you for the rest of their lives. You want them to learn enough to be able to manage life going forward.
Exactly. It is very much like parenting.
Yes.
You start out with these couples, these co-parents, and they're like toddlers, and then
Yeah.
you take them through the teen years, and it's beautiful when you can see them mature into the adult of co-parenting.
Yes. How come she got 2 cookies and I only got 1?
I
Right?
know.
Yeah.
Well,
Very
let's talk
much.
about the mission statement of the cookie. So just a couple of more things I want to mention before we just sort of wrap this up. But if another thing I think is important is if either parent has an individual therapist, I think it's extremely important that PCs are able to talk with the party's individual therapists.
Oh, yeah.
And why do you think that's important, Rick?
I find it very well. The number one thing I see that becomes a danger is the therapist is working towards certain goals that undermine some of the goals that I'm trying to do as a PC for the 2 parents.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes the individual therapist doesn't understand what a PC is or
right.
what the PC process is supposed to accomplish. And so it'll work. Yeah. It'll be counterproductive.
Also, I've seen the impossible co-parent who has a therapist who he or she is used to manipulating.
Molding into what they want. Yes. Yes.
So you have a session and something is decided and that parent doesn't like what you did or what the other parent did or how the session went. And they go to their therapist the next week and talk all kind of trash, make up lies, say things that happened that didn't happen. And the therapist is appalled.
Yes.
And if the therapist is appalled, he or she is going to give the wrong advice.
Of course.
So it's very, very helpful if the PC is able to touch base with, or even I would even go as far as copy that therapist on your recap.
Oh, yeah.
So that the therapist is in the loop of what is going on. And when I would do that, I would often include a sentence or two about why we decided to do it this way or something for the benefit of the therapist. So it makes it harder for that impossible parent to go into their therapist and make up things.
Yeah.
Because that therapist could say, well, I don't know, I read that recap. Didn't sound like that's really what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helpful. That keeps that person, if he or she thinks they can divide and conquer,
right,
they're going to go for that, right? So make sure, and I have those releases signed right up front with my contract, because after a while they may not sign the release anymore because they don't like what you're doing. So you get them to sign it up front right away.
Yes.
For at least a year, so that you know that you have the right to communicate with that therapist. And I find I never really had to do a lot of picking up the phone and calling them for any reason.
No.
Unless I thought that they needed to be educated about something. It's dependent on who it was. And a good therapist will tell you, I don't know anything about this. This is not my area of expertise. I want to learn. Great.
Right.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing and why. And that can be very, very helpful, not only to this particular client, but any future client that they have.
Yep.
That ends up in this process. And finally, people always ask me, are my children going to be involved in this process? Well, not right away. I don't think you need to meet with the child right away as a PC. No. And oftentimes the parents want you to meet with the children because they want the children to dump all the garbage on you so that you're biased towards the other parent or against the other parent. And I always felt it was important to spend about 90 days with those parents so I could kind of get a flavor of who they were. And then it's always so interesting to meet the kids. Because the parents will tell you all kinds of things. Oh, our kids don't know we're in conflict. They have no idea until you meet with them. And I used to tell the kids, I am not going to tell your parents anything you tell me. I don't need to.
Right.
But I need to know up here in my brain where you all are so that I know how to work with your parents better. And they like that. And then I would say, okay, give me suggestions on what I need to do for your parents. And I would get long lists because I'd stand at a whiteboard and they would get all like animated. Well, I wish they would stop doing this at my soccer practice, or I wish they would do this instead, or I wish it. drop off and pick up, this wouldn't happen. And I would get a long list of things. And then I knew, okay, this is where we really are, which gave me the benefit of going back into the parents and saying, I met with your children. I'm not going to tell you what they said, but I can tell you this. They know you're in conflict. So cut it out.
Yes.
And I also got to say, you have great kids. They're amazing. Don't screw that up. Let's preserve that. Or they're 9. If this goes on for 3 more years until they're 12, this is going to be a problem. You're going to have a difficult teenager, Yes. So I would be able to do some of that education. And then they couldn't argue with me because I'd met their kids. So, right.
Right.
And that was powerful. And I oftentimes never met with the kids again because the purpose of a PC is not to manage the children or to bring them in on anything. But I do think it's helpful to get their point of view for your own purposes. And they won't tell you anything if they think you're going to announce it in the next PC session. So
right.
I didn't announce it.
No. But
it gave me ammunition to say, okay, you guys, your kids are pretty great. Let's keep that going.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to PCs now. You have an impact that can last for years and years and years if you do it well.
Right.
If you're remembered. And kids feel like, wow, ever since they started going to that PC, my parents seem better. Whatever that better looks like doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As long as the kids say my parents seem better. So anything else, Rick, that you can think of about the PC process that we failed to explore?
No, I want to draw the analogy to the mediation that there's a lot of things that you miss out on. And with mediation, your rights get violated and you get taken advantage of. In the PC world, you need to know what the PC process is about so you can maximize. Here's the bottom line for me: maximize your chance to get all the peace you can in your life and for the rest of your life. If the PC is doing their job correctly and you understand how that process goes, you maximize your potential for peace.
Yes, I like that. Maximizing your potential for peace. Cool. Okay. Well, I hope that was helpful to those of you who are anticipating the PC process, or maybe you're in the middle of it. If you're in the middle of it and you're feeling non-confident about your PC, what should they do, Rick?
First, shoot us an email about your PC.
I was leading you to say, listen to Co-Parent Dilemmas.
And then listen to Co-Parent Dilemmas.
No, anytime you try to tell a professional how to do their job, it's probably not going to bode well for you. However, if you heard something today that you think would be helpful in the PC process, ask your PC about it. Just say, hey, I've been reading a lot about this or listening to some things, and I'm wondering, about a communication protocol. I think it might be helpful. Do you know of any? So be careful about how you bring up these subjects, because PCs are going to have an ego like everybody else in a profession like this, who they're not going to want to feel like you're telling them how to do their job. But at the same time, I think you should and deserve to get as much out of the PC process as you can. It's not cheap and it's court ordered. And if you have to do it, you want it to be done in a way that's really going to be helpful.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to you guys next week.
Yep. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Bye. The information contained in this podcast is generic. It must not be misconstrued as constituting legal or psychological advice. Decisions relevant to any specific individual, family system, or case require the direct evaluation of skilled, child-centered professionals.